All right, so let's take a look at this poll that will open up our conversation around a hybrid interaction where we're in different places. So here's the question: what is your biggest challenge or concern around communicating in a hybrid world? Is it knowing that the intended message is getting through, really concerning about getting that message, making it reach those that you intend to reach, creating real connections with the people that you're interacting with? You can go ahead and start answering if the poll is open and in front of you. Making others feel heard and understood. Is that an issue for you? Is that a challenge? Keeping others focused on what's important, or is it maybe something else? All right. If it's something else, you can go ahead and put that something else into the chat if you'd like to. Hopefully all of you are on devices where you can answer this poll. If not, just in case, I know sometimes that happens, I will throw that question into the chat, just so you have it there, just in case. Don't want to leave anybody out. All right, so again, what is your biggest challenge concerning this communication world where we are in a hybrid way? All right. So if we have those results, let's go ahead and take a look. So it looks like for the majority of you, 50%, that's half, say creating a real connection in important conversations. I have an important conversation, but it's hybrid, it's somewhat remote, it's not fully in person. And that's my concern. That's my challenge that I want to overcome. Next up, 33% of you are saying, knowing that my intended message is getting through. I have a message. I know what I want to get across in this conversation. I'm just not always sure. And then a couple of you saying that making others feel heard and understood. And we had 6%, at least one of you saying keeping others focused on what's important. So really, we cover the range here of concerns, and we're going to address all of these. That's the good news. And our next hour together, we'll address all of those and take care of those challenges that you have. All right, Barbara is saying all of these. Yeah, it comes up. And probably you're thinking for yourself, Barbara, it's according to the situation, the audience, what's going on. That might certainly come to bear there as you're thinking about what is most challenging. Here's our conversation today. Here's what we're focused on for the next hour or so: communicating with impact in a hybrid work environment. This is what we're all about. Here's what we're going to be doing. Here's our program objectives, what we aim to get to here. We want to reframe your mental approach to hybrid communication. And at Pinnacle Group, this is what we found is helpful. If we can reframe the way that we see communication. And that's what we're going to do today. We will be doing our best to take a new look, a new lens at hybrid communication. We want to explore a universal interaction plan. So this will be a plan that you can use in any situation where you have maybe majority remote, you've got some hybrid interaction to do. We're going to create a plan for that. And then expanding your awareness potential during a hybrid communication and interaction. So that awareness potential, for some of us, it's been a shift. As we were in person, when we were in person, it was pretty easy to read body language in the room around us, to get a sense, maybe a feel, to have empathy as we were in the room together. It's gotten a little more challenging if we have people who are remote to us. And as we think about hybrid, that's where at times we're communicating in person, and we shift to that gear, and then we have to shift that gear to when someone's remote, or maybe having both at the same time. So we're talking about that gear shift that's going on here. How do I remain aware of what's going on around me? Identifying intentional communication practices for driving results. So we will think about that. What are some good practices that we can put into place as we move forward? So these are the things that we are about today, what we're going to be focusing on. I want to give you a statistic. 74% of US companies either are currently or plan to implement a permanent hybrid work model. So we're either already in that hybrid work model, or 74% of us will be in that permanent hybrid work model We're just going to use it going forward. So what this says to us is that hybrid communication is something that we all need to master. Every single one of us. And I would say, let's look at it in the positive. This is where the world is going. We have the opportunity, we have the technology to do this. So let's embrace it. Let's be that person who masters it, who continues to communicate and connect as we move forward. And we're going to give you some skills and some support around that, some tools to do that now. I want you to think about right now an opportunity that you have to communicate in a hybrid way. So again, this could be where at times you're shifting into remote and at other times you're shifting into in person. Think about those opportunities or maybe those groups that you communicate with for you personally, where you need to be masterful at communicating in a hybrid way. The reason why I say that is we all know, you all know that as adults and adult learning, we want to be practical. We love learning new things, but we want it to be practical. So the practical way of building a skill and expanding how we do something is to get specific and to make it personal and relevant. So I really want you to be thinking about that opportunity for you that you have to communicate in a hybrid way. So that's why I call that out for us now. So I invite you to keep that in mind and start to practically think about how you can apply the work that we do together here today. All right. Is there anyone, and Zoe, you can help me keep an eyeball on this here. Is there anyone who does not have the handout? You didn't get it for some reason, you weren't able to download it, any issues there, you can let us know in the chat or you can raise your hand if you know how to do that on. Yep, and Zoe just put it into the chat just in case. So there it is for you. You can download it. It is a writable PDF, just so you know. I'd love for you to have that open. We're not going to get right into it right this minute, but we will be doing that a little bit later on. And I want you to have it. This is yours to keep. This is going to be your plan, your approach, your practices that you're going to be capturing there. All right. And let us know, is there anybody who's having any issues with downloading or with seeing that? Any issues? All right. Looks like we're good to go. Just to open up the interaction here, you do have an option here. You have at the top, it is for me at the top. I know for some people, sometimes it's at the bottom, but at the top, you do have a bar that you can annotate. You can give us some reactions. In those reactions, you can give us thumbs up, applause. You can raise your hand, certainly, if you have a question. Just to let you know that's there for you, and we want to keep you connected here. Also with the chat, I'm going to have the chat open the whole time if you have something you want to chat with us. All right, so let's get rolling here. I want to focus in on this first bullet that we have in our program objectives, and that is to reframe your mental approach. Why is it that we need to reframe our mental approach to hybrid communication as opposed to in person all the time, or maybe even remote all the time? Well, it's because hybrid communication calls for more from us. It's calling for us to step up even more in our communication practices. So that's why we need to reframe it. First thing I want to do is put it into context. Let's talk about where we were 4 years ago, 5 years ago. What was communication like? Well, in the previous environment, as we communicated with each other, we had that frequent opportunity to share the same space and time. As a matter of fact, I remember a time, maybe you do too. I remember a time where we just wouldn't have the meeting if everybody couldn't be here in person. Does anybody else remember that? You can raise your hand, give me a thumbs up. Yep, I see some hands there. Okay, well, you know what? Kevin can't be here today. So we'll just postpone the meeting for a time when everybody can be together. That was how we were at one point. Frequent opportunities to share that same space and time together. Again, going back to where we were before this hybrid world that we're in now, fixed and predictable expectations for outcomes. Now, we might have thought at the time, if you think about it, you might have thought that things were unpredictable or volatile then. Now it's a whole new world. But there was a bit of focus, of ability to say, here's the expectation, here's the outcome, here's the timeline, and we can follow it. But now that's been a bit upended. And then a final point here to think about that previous environment, spontaneous interactions that led to solutions, connections, and clarity. We call them water cooler conversations, which water coolers I don't think even exist anymore, certainly as we work in a hybrid way. But there was a break area perhaps where you could meet up with others, or even in the hallway. You might have that spontaneous conversation where you suddenly came up with a solution to something, or you connected more deeply on something. And that was what we had before. We don't have that now. So as we think about where we were and where we're going, let's think about reframing it. How can we reframe it? Most of us are working in a hybrid way now. Let's go ahead and define what that hybrid workplace really means. Well, it's a work environment where goals, objectives, outcomes, modes of connection transcend space and time. And the other piece of this definition, generally some combination of in-office and at-home workers. I was talking with a leader the other day. At Pinnacle Group, we work with global organizations, and I was talking with a person the other day who has a team member in Japan, a team member in Australia, and as they seek to get things done, they have to transcend time zones. This can't be a barrier for them. So for this person, it really transcends space and time, keeping that connection. So we're having to reframe our thinking around this. And so I want to look at some ways that we can reframe it, or some ways of thinking about it. So we need to bring them together, whoever it may be, a team, a group of people. We need to bring them together without bringing them fully together in the same space. So this is a call that we have as we work to interact with others, making intangible things tangible. And also focusing everyone simultaneously at different times. If we think about that leader I was talking to, we all need to be focused on an outcome, on a deliverable, but we're in different time zones, we're in different places, and perhaps the person in Australia is working at it at a time when we're sleeping, quite frankly, here. So it's simultaneously happening. We're simultaneously working on something, but it's in different times, it's in different ways, different places. So taking a look at this, we have a call to action here. It's to transcend this, to reframe our thinking. And if you look at this, it's a bit daunting, bringing people together, making them feel really connected when they're not in the same space and time, making intangible things tangible. So we still have outcomes that we need to get to, deadlines that we need to get to. We still have those tangible things, but we have to make the intangible tangible. So this is something that is called upon by us as we will communicate with each other. So I'd love for you to put into the chat now, are there things that come to mind for you as you take a look at reframing your approach and thinking about bringing people together, making that intangible things tangible, coming, in that time element there, making things happen in a way that's we're in that same lockstep. What are some challenges around this as you look at this reframing need? What are some challenges for you? And you can throw those into the chat. Maybe you have something specific around bringing people together, around making intangible things tangible, or that time challenge there. So let's open up the chat and see what you have to say for that. I also would welcome you at any point really to unmute and speak up. Love to get voices in the room here. Anybody have an example?
Sure. Hi, my name is Megan.
Hi, Megan.
Thanks, Suzanne. And I was going to start to type it. We used to use a whiteboard an awful lot. And I know there's like a whiteboard tool here. It's not something I've been super practiced at, you know, and it was, we kind of told the story of a situation on a whiteboard. And that helped us all kind of translate our words and thoughts into see that we're on the same page.
Yeah. I would agree with you, Megan, that it was easier when we were in the same room. And yes, I've been in organizations where some organizations, do you remember that? I don't know if you remember, where the whole wall was painted with whiteboard paint, right? And you could literally get up in a tactile way, and many people learn and absorb in a tactile way. We get up, we can write it down. We can all back up and take a look at it together. Lovely. I, Megan, have been using the whiteboard on Zoom, especially. We use Zoom quite a bit at Pinnacle Group, and I use it. I use it all the time. If I had time here with you today, I'd probably be throwing that in there because it's one of my favorites. Let you write it down. So having everybody write down their information, and then everybody gets to take a look at it. If we can reframe our thinking toward that, and Megan, you were saying you haven't used it as much. I would say for all of us, it's calling upon us to really get in and play with the mind of play. Let's enjoy this. Let's have fun with the interaction. We used to do it when we had a wall that was a whiteboard. Let's do it now virtually. But get into Zoom and play with it for yourself, just to be used to that, or bring in a team member into the Zoom, and the two of you work together with it. The more you work with it, it's like anything else, Megan, you know it. The more you work with it in a hands-on way, the more comfortable you get with it, the more comfortable everybody gets with it, and the smoother it runs and flows. All right, Barbara is saying use of technology. What's reaching out, what's really out there. Yeah, knowing what's really out there, how to develop planned spontaneity. Yes, I love that. That's a great phrase, Barbara, planned spontaneity. And yes, I know at Pinnacle Group, we do this all the time. We'll text each other and say, hey, you want to hop on Teams? And we'll hop on Teams. Literally, I've done it for 5 minutes, 5-minute meeting. Hey, is this making sense to you? Is this how we should run this? What do you think? We get that synergy, that connection, and then we're off and running. So we have to plan it. It's a little more planned, isn't it, Barbara? I love that phrase. We can use that throughout. Neil is saying you lose the fun via Zoom. Yeah, some fun. Well, Neil, I hope you're having fun now. Maybe a little bit. Used to always have a laugh or two in the meetings. Rarely happens in Zoom. Yeah, I feel that, Neil, and I have sensed that as well. We need to figure out how to put some life into our hybrid world. For me, Neil, what I do, and we're going to be talking about this as a practice in a few minutes, is I literally force myself to be in this present moment. And that doesn't transcend everything, but here we are, and the miracle of technology, really. Here we are today. We're in different parts. I know one person told me she's at the beach. We won't call anybody's name out, but I know one person who's down the shore, lucky person. But here we are, we're all together. We're literally together, even though we're not physically in the same space. And if I, as the person for this moment leading the conversation, can really feel that and sense that, I think it supports a bit of connection, a bit of greater connection. Now, everybody has to come into it voluntarily and really enter into the conversation, but I think it can be created. And with the fun, I think in some ways, and we're going to talk about this in a few minutes, you have to find those intentional ways of doing that. Thinking about it ahead of time, bringing it in during. Not as easy. It's not as organic, Neil, I would say. And I get that. I totally understand that. And we've got Tim coming in here. Thanks, Tim, for bringing your thoughts in here. Communicate one-on-one with teammates outside of formal meetings. Recreate the water cooler. I'm with you on that, Tim. The one-on-one has made a huge comeback. And over the last couple of years at Pinnacle Group, what we've noticed, our facilitators, our coaches, our designers, what we have noticed is that managers are coming forward and saying, I have started to institute more one-on-ones. And now the connections are being made. So the one-on-one has been a powerful force as we've moved through this time of disconnection together. I'm with you on that one, Tim. Keith is saying takes more planning. Yes. Yeah, go ahead. I hear a voice coming in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the challenges that I've seen is a technical challenge where if you got people in a conference room and the cameras at the far end of the conference room and the people at the far end of a table, the people, very small. So
Yes.
it's hard to get a sense of cohesion. And there's also oftentimes problems with audio quality, trying to make that work for everybody, those at home and those in the conference room.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Mark. And I did a session the other day that was hybrid, and it was a challenge. I tried to position myself as close as I could to the camera. I thought about the whole layout of the room. I had a flip chart behind me that I was taking notes on. I became very narrative throughout it as the facilitator. I would say things like, "Oh, Maria just left the room, and she'll be right back. John and Jose, who's on with us remotely." And I would say, I'm going to write that down on the flip chart behind me, and I'll say it out loud, narrate it out loud as I'm writing it. It's more effort. And we've talked about, somebody said it's more intentional, as Keith says, takes more planning. But yes, I would agree with you, Mark. That is a challenge in the hybrid world when we have the mixture. I'm going to be honest with you right now. The first time, this was 2017, for a large global company, I did a hybrid, I facilitated a hybrid session. By the end of that thing, I was so exhausted from the effort that I exerted. I literally, if I could have and wouldn't have been embarrassed, I would have laid down and taken a nap right there in that conference room. It was so exhausting because I was constantly concerned about the people. Hey, let's hear from you, this other person who's remote in, wherever that person was, the Netherlands. Let's pull you in. I want to make sure that we're getting the information from you. Can you see? There was a lot of effort by that facilitator, by me at that point. So yeah, it does definitely take more out of you, and takes more planning, as Keith is saying here. And then Keith is saying, add some games and puzzles. I love that idea. Yeah, go ahead.
If it makes anybody feel better, I have an AV company. We do corporate AV conference rooms, and every company is having similar issues, Mark. So as they're returning to work, have to set up their rooms better to help facilitate better remote calls and stuff. So it's all over.
You're saying we're not the only one, Allison?
No, definitely not.
Well, Allison, since you're an expert in this area, any tips? How have you seen it done well? Are there any best practices that you can share?
The biggest thing is the quality of the equipment in the room. So your mics have to be pretty sensitive, and yet also be able to block out the crinkling paper and stuff like that, which it's out there, but it's redoing a whole conference room. Mm-hmm. So it's just a matter of having really good equipment. I mean, your speakers, your mics, and the cameras now are amazing. But you need a few of them. You can't use just one camera, so it can, follow a presenter or zoom in on the person who's talking, or, stuff like that. So all about the equipment.
Yeah, the equipment, the technology, and then knowing how to use it, because sometimes you have advanced technology and you don't know how to use it, so it's not of no use anyway.
Well, that's where we come in. We make it all easy, a push of a button.
Hey, that is good to know. I'm locking that in, and thank you, Allison, for bringing that forward. Love that expertise that you brought in. Maria is saying 5-minute personal story. Bringing that into a conversation or a meeting, which must relate to the task at hand. So whatever we're doing right now, we stay on task, we bring that story in. I'm seeing that there, Maria. Scroll along here. There's some great ideas and great thoughts in the chat here. And by the way, for the chat, if you click on those 3 dots next to the typing space there, where you can enter your message and type, those 3 dots, you can save the chat. So just letting you know that there's some good ideas and thoughts here in the chat. I would recommend, when we're all done here, as we're wrapping up, to go ahead and save that chat. Some great ideas in here. Virtual happies with the team, says Richard. Thank you for that. Use of old-fashioned telephone. Barbara, how about that? Let's go back to the old telephone. Hybrid meetings, it can work well when everyone uses their laptop in the meeting. on Zoom and in Teams. Yeah, everyone has equal visibility. Yeah, intentionally doing that. Yeah, thank you. And Susan saying, love those ideas, Keith and Maria. All right, great. So keep them coming. Keep those ideas and best practices coming in the chat. And again, you can save it at the end. You've got a nice list of things that you can be doing. So we're reframing the way that we go at it. I read an article the other day that was talking about a robust hybrid workplace. And in this article, they were imagining this new world that we can go into if we don't resist it. I love in person. I'll be honest with you. That's my favorite. I love being in the room. I love the energy of it, the whole thing. But can we reimagine and reframe our thinking? And it is something that's more fluid. Let's imagine a fluid workplace where we're working, we're handing things off, we're connecting on things, we're all well informed, we're all connected. Let's imagine that. It's up to leaders, certainly, and this is where you can come in as a subject matter expert, a leader in thought, or if you're a leader in your organization or can influence others. It's up to us to ensure that the whole world has that hybrid, that effective hybrid experience. But it starts with the individual. If we're going to optimize this on that larger level, it starts with the individual and thinking about how we're working with the individual and what they're experiencing. So what's the secret? Let's bottom line it here. In everything you do, be intentional. And this is deceptively simplistic, but I will tell you, we have been doing at Pinnacle Group, we've been doing virtual meetings and at times hybrid meetings and interactions for years now. We had a room that was in our office that was devoted to interactions that were remote. We really got ahead of that. And we found over the past, certainly the past couple of years, but beyond that, before that, that's what it's about. It's about being intentional. And someone here said that it takes planning. Keith was saying that it takes planning. That's what Keith's talking about. We must be intentional before, during, and after. Intentional about our communication preparation, intentional about how we focus people. Some of you said that it's a challenge for you to make sure everyone's focused on the right thing, most important thing. We have to be intentional about bringing that focus in. We have to be intentional about the good old-fashioned giving and receiving of information, of energy, being receptive, even though we're virtual at times, taking people in, but also that giving of information, how we give it. For me, and I'm just for pointing this out intentionally, I'm coming back to the camera. This is something intentional for me. I have myself positioned in a way, and most of you look fantastic. You look great. You would anyway, but you've positioned yourself in a way because I think we've been virtual so much now, we've had to figure out how to do this well. But when we first started, I had a lot of meetings that were like this. Yeah, so, I think that this is going to work out and I feel really connected to you. Or the looking down. For now, what we've discovered is that we're more connected if we can see more of each other. So intentionally where you place the camera and where you place yourself, very important. For me, I keep coming back to the camera, intentionally doing so when I'm saying something. If I were listening and being receptive in that mode, I might look down at the camera and just start to see what your body language is doing, take you in. But if I'm talking to you, like for instance, right now, I'm looking at Carol. I'm looking at Carol. Hey, Carol, I really, she's waving at me. I really want you to feel connected to me, for you to believe me, for you to trust me with this. Much less impactful than this, Carol. I really want to connect with you on this. Now, this feels weird to me because I'm now looking at an inanimate object, but for Carol, much more powerful. Probably she feels a little more connected as she looks at me. Yes, Carol? I'm getting a nod. Okay. But this is intentional. All the things that we do is intentional. Again, sounds simplistic, but as you think about the pre, the during, the post even, and how you follow up. When we're working in a hybrid way, when we're working in a remote way, we must be intentional. So go ahead there. Yeah. Hey, Robert.
It seems to me, in terms of the intentional, you've actually created a new dimension when you start using hybrid.
Yes.
You think of the executives, I'll call it, of multinational corporations. They traveled the world delivering the same message, group after group, over long periods of time. They were never in the office because they were out communicating. When you start using a hybrid mixed in, you now can intentionally choose when you need to be in person for impact versus hybrid.
Yeah.
You've changed, you're swapping long periods of time for communication to shorten the time frame. So now everybody actually does get the message at the same time. Lots of people have always complained about it, they never all seem to get the message at the same time. But when you had to travel the world to deliver it, you couldn't deliver it at the same time.
No.
So you've created, if you accept the hybrid model, you create a new tool that allows you to actually sort of create a fourth dimension compared to the old.
Robert, wow. You're so right. It is a new dimension that we've created. Aren't human beings amazing?
And when you're talking about the need for focusing on the people, that was always there.
Yeah.
We thought we did it, but we probably didn't. It's just like managers who thought they were managing by walking around and chatting with everybody, but never measured performance.
Yeah.
The one who looked busy but never did anything looked good.
Yeah. All right, Robert, thank you for that. That's a beautiful perspective. And yes, we have the ability now it's the latest message. It's the latest piece of information. We can connect everybody in all at the same time, no matter where they are and what they're doing. So there's that ability to almost be superhuman with it. And listen, I feel for, and I'm in there sometimes, I feel for all of us who are challenged by this new world, this brave new world. It is a challenge to stay really in that human connection space, but we are given the opportunity and it's where we're heading. So what can we do to stay in that connection, to keep everybody informed, to do that? And Robert really painted that picture beautifully. Rich is saying to us, listening is an important skill for effective virtual meetings. The art of asking questions is equally. Yes. So if you have those good questions and come in there with them, and we'll be talking about that a little bit in our tool. Thank you for that, Rich. Love that input.
Suzanne?
Yes, go ahead.
One thing there's different dimensions to this. It's a little complex, but I've been working internationally and for 20 years, and started with the old star phones. If anybody remembers those were like a wonderful technology.
Yeah, Tim.
Everybody didn't have to hold their phone at their ear the whole meeting. And we've evolved to what we have now. But and so some of the process is the same, but I think the biggest thing we found going all the way back and all the way through is to set expectations prior to the meeting, so that people know what to expect during the session, and what behaviors are normal for the group that you're with, because in different cultures you have different behaviors that are allowed and different behaviors that are normal.
Yeah.
There's a bit of expectation setting that has to go on in preparation, as a part of the preparation for the meeting, and then you can follow your being intentional and things like that. But I think having everybody with the same expectations as to process coming into the meeting is a big part of it.
Yeah. Tim, thank you so much for that input. And absolutely. And in the tool that we're going to go over in a few minutes, there's a space to think about that for some best practices there. And Rich is chiming in here. Agendas are critical to set those expectations. And I would agree, Rich. And if you can make them visible, human beings are visible. You go back to that old pie chart that talks about what human beings are taking in the moment and what they absorb and remember. We've got that 50 odd percent, I think it's 52%, 58% of what we're taking in has to do with the visual. It's over half of what we're really taking in and absorbing has to do with the visual. So anytime we can make something visual that we can have the impact there, it's going to reinforce it so that it can be more tangible and they can take it away. Even using descripted descriptive visual words that evoke a visual meaning. That can be helpful too. All right, thank you for this input. Keep those ideas flowing in the chat. Loving all of this. So here we are, we're saying the secret is to be intentional in how we do everything and making that connection. We need the right tools and the right approaches to do this. And sometimes it feels like we are out at sea with a lot of turbulence going on. So let's talk about some anchors that we can use. Here's some hybrid communication anchors that we can use. Consistent practices and a solid plan. And we have got a tool for you. And this is the tool that was sent earlier to you that Zoe put into the chat. I want to take a look at that tool now, because this is exactly what this tool does for you. It brings you those anchors of practices and planning. So let's take a look at this. We won't need to spend much time describing this because you have already described much of what's in here. Reset and refresh those expectations. Tim was just talking about this. You know, how do we do that in this hybrid way? Engaging in open dialogue about elevated needs and assumptions. So not just making assumptions about how we work together. I had one team leader who said that she set norms. She was with a team that had been intact and been together for years, almost a decade. And she said they created a hybrid team charter, is what they called it. You don't have to call it that, but she got together with her team virtually in a hybrid way, and they set new norms and expectations for their team on how they will communicate, how they will interact. And one thing that they brought up is they said, if I'm remote, and they had a person who was always perpetually remote. If I'm remote, I feel like I don't understand the decision-making process. I just hear about the decision. Okay, well, we decided this. And if I'm remote, if I wasn't in that in-person conversation, perhaps, all I know is the decision. So what they decided part of their norms is that someone on the team, they would identify somebody on the team as they're making that decision in person. And they would say, hey, you are going to let Lisa know, Tim, you're going to let Lisa know that we just made the decision, but also you're going to flow her through quickly how we came to that decision. And that was one of the norms that they came up with. That's just one example, but coming up with those norms that will create that way of interacting with each other that transcends and moves through all interactions, but certainly before a meeting, things like agendas, making it tangible, things like expectations, making that tangible. Great practices here as we work in a hybrid way. Clarify those roles as we're working a hybrid way, establish clear protocols, all of this very helpful. Leverage the moment. So the power is in the present moment. This is something Louise Hay said. I don't know if anybody used to read her stuff. Louise Hay talked about the power is in the present moment. And even when we're virtual or hybrid, it's still in this present moment. Being present, there's nothing more powerful than that. Fully, as you lead it, as you interact, be present. So making sure that you can do that, not easy in this world. So we need to prepare for those conversations. The next page in this tool gives you that preparation outline. Eliminate those distractions. Again, I'm not saying this is easy. Nothing that I'm talking about today is easy, but we want to be intentional about that. Turn up the radar on body language. So just be looking. If you haven't heard from somebody in a while, if they seem closed off, if they just turned their camera off suddenly when something got mentioned, all of these things, let's see what we can do to pay attention to that and use that technology strategically. Balance that, those expressive and receptive behaviors. We talked a little bit about this, but what those expressive behaviors are, those moments where I'm expressing ideas and thoughts and being intentional about that. But also, how can I be receptive? Even in this world, you can see me, and having that eye contact at times, having open body language rather than closed off or here I am, much more receptive to those around you. Those cues are small and subtle, but very powerful and impactful. So here are some thoughts and ideas for that receptive, those expressive and receptive behaviors. We need both. If you think about it, in every communication, in every moment of every interaction, you're either being expressive or receptive. Let's be intentional about it. In our team meeting, our staff meeting this morning, there's been some tough things going on recently. I'm going to start with receptive behaviors. Hey, everybody, how's it going? I really want to know where things are for you so that we can work effectively together. I shut up, I listen, I may have a poll, I may put a question into the chat to see what comes up, but I start receptive because I think it's going to be most effective here. So thinking about how you balance that out. Optimizing team interactions. So this is talking about coming back to that one-on-one and how powerful that can be, especially in a hybrid world. Establishing daily channels. Those daily channels, we have to get used to this. How do we create that interaction, that synergy when we are remote? Okay, so these are some thoughts here for best practices. What I'd like for you to do is, if you have any other best practices, throw them into the chat, because that's going to help us. You can save that chat and take it away later for yourself. So keep those flowing in the chat. Carol is coming in here. Just changed my view to standard instead of side by side. Yes, so if you go to that, for me, I have the grid. As I'm looking at all of you, and yes, there are ways of creating your view that's going to be optimal, but for all of you, I have you in grids so I can see more of you at the same time. That does help how you're seeing things, and up and lining up that camera. All right, thank you for that, Carol. Team charter is a best practice on how to get the work, how we work together. Thank you for that, Keith. Much appreciated. Next page of this work page here that we have, this worksheet that we have here, is all about planning for your situation. Here's what I'd like for you to do. I want you to take a couple of minutes here. You're not going to get to everything, but I want you to take a couple of minutes. At the beginning, I asked you to think about an opportunity that you have to communicate in a hybrid way. I'd like for you to take a few moments to write down some thoughts on that. You probably already have this in mind because you've been thinking about your situation. What's your desired outcome? Come heck or high water, I want this to happen by the end of this interaction. What is it? Don't sell yourself short. Go for it. What is your desired outcome? That people will feel connected to me, that people will trust me, that they will understand more clearly the next steps in our path, that they will bring their input. I don't know where they are on things, that I will get good, solid input from others, whatever that desired outcome is. Your audience, identify who they are, maybe some key things about them, communication and communication style might be in there. Yes, Rich, begin with the end in mind. That's that desired outcome. So that audience, what do you need to know about them? And remember, as you think about it, we're being intentional. Remember, strategies. What methods will you use to get to your desired outcome? What methods will you use? What steps, what actions, what behaviors will you use? So start to jot that down. This is a writable PDF if you pulled it up. Also, you might have printed it. Go ahead, jot some thoughts and ideas down. Ideal communication platform. This is, again, where we need to be strategic and intentional. There are several platforms that we have here mentioned at the bottom, and when you might want to use them is here as well. We go back, I think it was Barbara who said the good old-fashioned phone, sometimes pick it up, have that conversation. If I've determined by my desired outcome what I'm hoping to get to this particular audience, my strategies, if I've determined, you know what, for this conversation, I think the phone is best. Beautiful. You've got a multitude of options, but that's the one that's tailored and customized and will support getting to my desired outcome. So go for it. Is it video? Do I need to see them? They see me. Text messaging, sometimes just to get something quick across, or instant messaging. Emails, sometimes if it's more detailed. So take a moment and go through this. Let's take about a minute here. Go through this and give it some meat here. Fill it in, and then we'll come back together.
Suzanne, I have to know, I hope I'm not disturbing anyone, but I have to know if you have watched any of Only Murders in the Building with Steve Martin and Martin Short.
You know what? I haven't, because I got so, at the beginning of the pandemic, I really would do a lot of streaming and watching of things. And I haven't gotten started on that one because I know I'm going to binge the whole thing.
They're very bite-sized. There's one point where they look at each other and they say text or call, and they say text seems to bother, calls seem to bother them. Let's text. And they, it's a generational thing. And then they sign their texts, yours, whatever. And it's really funny. I think you'd enjoy it for the communication part.
Oh my gosh, I love it. That's a great plug. And yeah,
You have to kind of consider the generation, I guess.
you have to consider, yeah, and even the person, although I've talked to plenty of people who are emerging professionals who are younger than me that really love in person. They crave it. They get a lot out of it. They want more of it.
Good.
But you're right. There's a generational thing there at times. Only Murders in the Building, Carol, is the name of it.
Yeah.
Martin Short and Steve Martin. I love Martin Short. Actually my favorite comedian. He is.
Very good.
All right. So I want to come back together and I want to just openly ask here, Zoe, my friends here who have been planning, Zoe, Regina, Carol, can I take it a little bit over? What is my drop dead ending time here?
We have until 10, so you have about
Okay.
30 minutes. Yep.
All right, good. And I won't take that 30 minutes. I honor your time and I don't want to take you too far over, but here's what I'd like to do. And Tim is saying during meetings, one-on-one chat messages are useful for side conversations, helping to fill in some of those who have missed on a point. Yeah, thank you for that. Yep, I would agree with you there. Use that technology, get used to using it and use it in a strategic, intentional way. That's the name of our game right now. All right, I'm going to stop sharing because I want to see all of your faces here. Here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to give you an opportunity to go into breakouts. And Zoe, I don't have breakouts on my end. So, you're hearing all the technical conversation here. So I apologize for that behind the scenes work that we're doing here. But Zoe, if you can give me pairs, if you can break people into pairs, that would be great. If we have one triad, that's fine. But pairs are great because you have more time to talk. I have found that in this session, I've run this session before with other groups, and this moment of coming together with a colleague and talking it through has been really powerful for a lot of people. Now, if you don't want to talk too fully about your particular chosen opportunity, maybe you don't want to talk, openly about it. So maybe just pulling out something that you want to discuss, but I want to give you some time to have a one-on-one conversation with others, with another person, with a partner. And here's what I'd like for you to do in this conversation. Let's just take a look at what we'll do here. Share one key element of your communication preparation tool. So the tool that you just worked through, you got your desired outcome, your audience, etc. So just one thing, maybe there's something about that audience that you're not sure of, you want some support around, whatever it may be. Gain feedback and support from your partner, and then you switch it, and then the other person does the same thing. They share, they get that feedback, and be prepared to share those insights with the full group when we come back together. Take a screenshot of this if you'd like to. It's simple, but this is what you're going to be doing in your breakout conversations. Just share one element, get that feedback, and switch. All right. Turning your camera on to demonstrate that you are engaged rather than multitasking rich. Yes, not always easy, but that's a sure sign that you're in it to win it. All right, so you can leave me out, Zoe, of these conversations, certainly. I don't want to be nosy. You can arrange it in a way that you think is best. But let us know, Zoe, what do we need to know about the technology part of the breakouts?
It will put you into a room and we'll have a countdown. Did you want 10 minutes or?
Let's say 10 minutes. And when we come back, we'll do a debrief, but I'll have you out before 10, everybody, I promise.
Great.
Getting some nods.
Yeah, I think it was. I did a whole change management process around hybrid work for about a year with a major pharma company. And
wow.
So there's always still stuff to learn, because then you got to put your entrepreneurial hat on, which is a lot different.
Yes.
We've been working in hybrid for a while, but there's all elements to learn and be more effective at.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great, Keith. Thank you for that. Yeah, so it sounds like you've been focused on this for a while and still, and you're still evolving. You're still bringing more to it.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. But let's get some insights. You can throw them into the chat. Love to, of course. I'm all about hearing your voices and all of that. But what were some key insights as you work together with your partner? Let's hear from you.
So I'll go since I have my mic on. So I learned this from Rich. So we were talking about kind of these one-on-one, as an entrepreneur, business development, things like that, and how to frame those conversations and make them more effective. So he gave me this acronym CODE. The C was for context, O was for objective, and then A was for alternate objective, and then T for time. In other words, don't waste my time. So I thought that was a very good way when sometimes you get on these calls, sometimes who you're speaking with is not necessarily your avatar. Sometimes it is. Sometimes I talk too much sometimes. And so that could give me a framework. I find it on my Beacon 101. Sometimes I talk too much. So this is a nice framework for me to keep in mind and work through it as an agenda, which was his other recommendation. Even if you're not going to even share the agenda, that you have an agenda that you kind of scratched out to make the most use of a 30-minute segment.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for that. I think we all wrote that down. That's something we can all use. The more tools, the better. The more focus, the better. Who else has a thought here you want to bring to us? Susan is volunteering Bob. You've been voluntold, Bob.
Well, he doesn't have to. I can talk about other things, but I thought it might be a good. I don't know how helpful I was, but I thought his situation would be one that we maybe all will run into. So
okay, that'd be great, and then we can get to Regina. Bob, would you mind?
I guess not. Thank you, Susie.
Sorry, Bob. You've done this to me. I just want to point that out.
Oh, I have? Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Didn't know I had.
Turn around.
Hey, Battelle.
Sorry.
I guess the situation is I'm the president of a small local nonprofits board. The nonprofit's 30 years old. It's been doing the same thing for 30 years. We run a 5K and a 10K run to raise money for the local nonprofits. And much of the board has been on the board for years. So they all sort of have their assigned role, and everything sort of ran on its mechanical way. And we did the same thing over and over for 30 years. And it's slowly wearing out. And the pandemic didn't help any. So I want to change it so that it sort of reawaken, I guess would be the right word, the board, so that they rethink things, are able to rethink strategy and activities and that kind of stuff. We have been essentially all virtual until a couple of months ago, and we've been all live. We meet at essentially a food court-like structure here in Kennett Square. The ideal would be to be able to go hybrid, but I don't know that we can ever pull that off because we don't have control over the site. There's no tools for connecting the remote in, except on somebody's phone, which means only one person can actually be aware of what they're doing. There's no way to make it work for the group. And there's just no way around that. It's just not a site we control, nor do we have the money to invest in a lot of equipment. But it relates, I think, and Keith, you talked about a group charter. I'm thinking maybe that's an approach that might work, is getting them to rethink. So I'm probably going to be calling you and asking you to talk about the group charter stuff that you've set up.
Oh, no problem.
Thank you. Because we need to change their roles. It's like having a work group that's done I do X. And I want to say, yeah, but if nobody's paying attention to Y, Z, A, and B, the group isn't getting any bigger. So we've got to rethink roles and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And a charter could do all of that. And I
Yeah.
wrote down there a compelling purpose. It's almost like we need to come back to why we do this. It's that compelling purpose. Is it the same as it's always been, or has it changed?
That hasn't really changed.
See?
We're probably, and those who aren't familiar with Kennett Square, it's a very event-driven town.
Yeah.
We're the first event of the season in early May. So we sort of kick off the primary season for events.
Yeah.
And the primary purpose is truly a fundraising purpose. We're trying to do it in a family involved, community involved, fun way, as opposed to the traditional somebody calls up and says, "Can you donate?" or that kind of stuff.
I'm wondering from the group, does anybody have a thought? Allison, I know you've gotten a lot of groups together to do things, but Allison or anybody else have, let's get at least one thought from the group for Bob.
Bob, has the money that you're raising gone down over the years?
It's actually because so much of the money is dependent on the sponsors. That was holding very constant until the pandemic. The pandemic kind of killed half our sponsorships. So the money collapsed this past year.
Wow.
It dropped by 40% when we had to do a virtual run 2021. 2020, we just walked away and sponsors left enough money with us. We still had 40%, 40 plus, something in that range.
So
This year we're down to
compelling
like
reason.
25% of the normal.
Yeah, that's a compelling purpose, right?
Yeah, we're in a reviving status at this point. We got it. It's no longer a habit. It's been 3 years off.
And revisiting why we're doing it. And if there are people in the group who don't believe in that why anymore, then maybe this isn't the right place for them. I mean, I think sometimes we have to come to that moment, and also maybe working with Keith to get that charter set. And I think that might be a good way to move forward in a different way. So I'm wishing you all the best, Bob, with that. Sounds like an important thing to get right.
But Bob, I have some contacts too. I don't know if you're familiar with Nonprofit University. I can make a connection for you also, be at least worth a discussion that they might be able to help you out. So I'll talk with you offline about that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Keith.
There we go. This is networking at its best. Regina, a thought from you.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking, Suzanne, about people being so visual. I am also very visual. And what has been lost for me when we do meetings and brainstorming is we don't use whiteboards and things like that. So I'm gonna try that. Because I would normally just stand up and go over to a whiteboard and start to put things together for people. So I'm gonna look into that and try that. Yeah. So thank you for that.
Yeah. So so easy to just jump right into it and get it going.
Yeah.
So but it's something you have to work with and get used to. So good. I'm glad for that, Regina. Practice it before you put it into play. Would be my suggestion there. We've got some things coming into the chat here. Maria's talking about finding the influencers in the group and meeting with them ahead of time. I love that idea. That's being very strategic. Again, if you click on those 3 dots next to the field where you type, you can save the chat. There were so many good ideas from this group. I can tell this group is experienced. You're experts, you're pros, you're good at what you do, you're passionate about it. I have enjoyed thoroughly my time with you, and I hope I get to come back and see you again at some point. And I wish you all the best with whatever it is you're planning for. May you reach that desired outcome and beyond. And also, I will be here after. If you have any questions you want to stay after, I'll stay as long as it takes. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I'll hand it over to Regina, to Zoe, to Carol, whomever, in closing things off. Thanks, everybody.
So thanks, everybody, for joining us this morning. Just to echo what Suzanne said, we hope you learned some practical things to apply. And thanks for connecting with us. Zoe just put a networking event in the chat. And I'll turn it over to Carol to see if Carol has any last comments she'd like to make.
I just like to thank everybody for coming, and I hope that you learned as much as I did today. I just found this very helpful. Thank you so much, Suzanne.
Couldn't get to my mute button. You're so welcome, Carol. Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. What a great group you have here.
Thank you.
Take good care, everyone.
Yes, take good care.
Okay. Have a great
Bye,
day.
everyone. Yes.
Bye, everybody.
Susanna,
Bye-bye.
since you said you had another minute or two,
Yeah.
this is Barbara. Please excuse me. I don't do great at 8:30 meetings.
I totally get it.
I'm not in my pajamas, but I'm not far from it. So, so that, I'm going to do something a little contrarian. So, I've been involved in doing some training, leadership development for some clients, and it hasn't been hybrid, it's been all remote.
Mhm.
And what I find that it's really easy to hide in remote, for people to hide.
Yeah.
And when I show PowerPoints, boy, is it easy for people. First of all, you don't see everyone because everyone gets pushed to the side. And even if you use the feature where you can reduce the size of the PowerPoint to see more people.
Mhm.
So what I've been doing is I create PowerPoints and I also create handouts. I send both of those electronically to the client, so they have it. I don't put the PowerPoints on the screen, because what I want to do, at least for the purpose of the training, is I want interaction. I want discussion. I want everyone, and I'm laughing because here I'm not, you don't see my video. I'm not there in person.
Right.
I want everyone there. I want everyone to see everyone's face, and I want everyone to have discussion. And so I ask a lot of questions for group discussion. We do lots of role plays. We put people into lots of breakout groups. I do everything I think about what I do when I'm doing in person, and I'm doing that ordinarily in person.
Lovely.
But I think what tends to happen is, and actually when I even do in person, I try not to use a lot of PowerPoints, because I want the connection.
Mm.
So what I'm trying to build into the remote is connection, where we see each other, we talk to each other, we interact with one another. I don't want people hiding, and I don't want the PowerPoint to take precedent.
Mm. I love that, Barbara. And it sounds like you've been successful in doing that and made some strong connections because of that. And same here for me to some degree. I do usually use PowerPoint in a session like this because it locks in the visual aspect of the information and the flow of ideas. But you notice I did some going back and forth at gallery, but I agree with you. PowerPoint is where we can hide a lot, especially with larger groups. If I have a smaller group, we have one program that we run that's usually it's what we call group coaching. Basically, it's with 10 or less leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And in that format, there is a strong connection with that group, and there's only 10 of them. So if we're really zeroing in on something that's on a PowerPoint slide, they're all there, they're locked in. But if it's a larger group, like this one, even if it's a larger group, it's really easy to hide. I would agree with you. And again, you have to be so intentional. And so for me, I'm constantly looking at the chat and talking about that.
Yeah.
I usually toggle back and forth between gallery and PowerPoint.
Sure. And I say I use the PowerPoint. I just send it to them, so it's not on the screen.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. And maybe only sometimes I'll use a PDF and I'll bring that PDF up like we did today, and let's work on it together. But
good point.
So right, yeah, good ideas there. And I think all that you're talking about, I think we can bring it into any interaction that's remote, if it's a meeting or what have you. So thank you for that perspective, Barbara, and your expertise.
Barbara, do you let them know that you won't be referring back to this PowerPoint?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they know. I mean, I tell them, and I make sure my PowerPoints are numbered. And I go to number 2 PowerPoint, and here's what we're covering, and then we talk about it. And I also have handouts. so I use both. And I agree with Suzanne, you can't do that every single time. It's not a process. I think we have a tendency to always think that there's a silver bullet and there's one way to do it for everything. And so my recommendation, if you thought that you might want to use what I've just said, don't think that it works every time or that it's good for every situation. It's good when you are trying to get interaction, to train, to get people to really get involved. But if you are in a situation where you really need to throw out information to a group of people, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, that's really good points there. Thank you so much for that, Barbara. I love it when we can bring people who have tried and true practices into the conversation. And yes, and that's why in that planning sheet, desired outcome and audience are up top, and that determines everything. Certain audiences and certain desired outcomes, you want to go in this direction, and certain, situations you want to go in the other. Anybody else have a thought or an idea or a question?
We actually give people permission sometimes to turn their cameras off.
Yeah.
Because we are in, some folks are in meetings online all day long.
Yes.
And it's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. So when I teach, I say to people, when we go in small groups, your cameras are on, because that's where so much of the discussion emerges, when they're in smaller groups. And then also when you have something you want to say, put your camera on. And it seems to be okay, because there's so much Zoom fatigue and screen fatigue. So yeah, it's a balance, Barbara. It's definitely a balance.
Agreed.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? I'm just curious to know.
Well, I came from NATO, where when I used to chair meetings at NATO, I would set up the audience. There was the 30 nations, and there, the representatives from the 30 nations. And the way we used to work the meetings is we would have, at the end of the meeting, we'd have a set of minutes that we called a decision sheet, right? And we would during the meeting, we would develop this decision sheet as we went along. And it wasn't very long. We didn't make complicated decisions very often. We tried to simplify it, but we'd have the decision sheet based on the discussion in the meeting. And then at the end of the meeting, we'd have a period where we would ask everybody if they agreed to that, and open the discussion up and have a discussion period. And if they agreed at the meeting, then the decision sheet stood, so they couldn't revisit it. So that was a very effective tool when you're making decisions. It's different than training, but what it did is it forced them to engage. It forced the people who didn't agree to engage, because if they didn't engage, then that decision sheet would document to their nations that they agreed to this in the meeting.
Wow.
Right? So it was a very powerful tool, but it forced everybody who had an alternative opinion to speak up in the discussion. And a lot of times that dragged on the meeting a little while, because they were timid and they wouldn't speak up until the end of the meeting, when they said, wait, I can't sign up to that. And then they'd speak up, and then we change it.
Yeah.
Get everybody to agree to it. But there's a lot of different techniques for different types of meetings, but that worked well in a meeting where you're trying to get decision among a disparate group. And if the group's smaller, you can have time for everybody to talk and give their opinion.
Sure.
But in a larger group, you have to have some kind of forcing function. And generally, the way to do it is to document things. So at the end of the meeting, you have a document that goes out and says, this is what we all agreed on, right?
It makes it tangible, doesn't it, Tim?
It does. And that forces them, if they know that's coming, then they're going to participate more.
Oh, wow. We might have to borrow from NATO. I love that. That's a new tool for me. Hey, this comes from NATO, everybody. No joke.
It sounds like an interesting tool to try and apply in a sales situation, actually, when a lot of corporate sales where there's lots of character.
Yeah.
Just a team who's moving through something.
Yeah.
Make decisions. Well, it is 9:59, and I want to defer to the group here. I know we want to be honoring our time. Thoughts, Regina, Carol, Zoe?
I just want to thank you, Suzanne.
Beacon is the premier executive networking organization serving the Mid-Atlantic region. To learn more, go to beaconforlife.org.